Views expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and do not necessarily reflect the views of the station, its management, or advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
The world is in a massive transition. Are you prepared? Hi, I'm Reverend Tracy L., and I am here to help you navigate through these uncharted waters. Many experts told me it was not possible to repair, regenerate, and restore my body. I proved them all wrong. Isn't it time for you to reclaim what is rightfully yours? If your answer is yes, then I invite you to join me while I will help you embrace the new earth and unlock your unlimited potential. Let's connect every Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern, right here on the Tracy L. Clark Show, as featured on Transformation Talk Radio. The old ways of connecting are done, so let's embrace together the new and unleash the superhuman within.
Welcome to this week's show. I am so thrilled to have our new listeners and our repeated listeners. We have a really good treat for you today, and this is why. First, though, I want to tell you, my book is finally coming out. People are like, what? Well, COVID put a little bit of a wrench in it. So October, we will see it by the end of the month. And so just go to tracylclark.com, watch, you'll get the updates. Everybody's asking. It is called God, Where Are You? It's me. So if you've had struggles, you've had hardships, money, emotions, whether it's even your health, you'll find some tips and some things that you can move through. And I share my story with you as well. So a lot of people have been asking, that's where you go. You know, as this whole new earth is unfolding, so are new financial systems. And if you've actually listened to the show before, or you're in one of our membership communities, you've heard me talk a lot about change. It has to change. And a lot of people don't like change. They have a really hard time with it. But if you're not willing to ask a different question, you're not looking for something else, you might find you're going to get caught. And this is why the old systems of everything we've worked in, from monetary systems, government systems, medical systems, they are changing. They're changing to the better. And this is why I'm so thrilled today that our guest has actually agreed to come back and spend an hour with us, Jeremy Wiseman from Guildhall Wealth. And Jeremy's one of my favorite people. We have great conversations, and I know he's helped a lot of you. And when you're looking at precious metals, there's a reason why. There's a lot of questions. So Jeremy, I'm so happy that you've agreed to join me today. I can't thank you enough right now.
Of course, Tracy, come on. Anytime.
You know, I have a lot of questions. If people want to call in and ask Jeremy a question, you can. We will open that up today. But I have a lot of questions here that people have submitted. You and I were just talking before. I heard this great analogy from Max Geyser, which was literally the Titanic didn't sink in 20 minutes, but the last 20 minutes it went down. When we look at all the monetary systems right now, and we look at things that are changing, people are still afraid. Like when I still say you need to understand gold or silver, they look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, why do we need silver? What is the reason? And even though you and I have had great conversations around industrial metal, around insurance, it's so hard for people to wrap their head around it. They're like, well, my advisor doesn't tell me about it. And I always say to get change, you have to actually go do your own research and your own homework. Mm-hmm. So what do you see right now? Because a lot of people will say to me, well, they're just printing money. So they print money. So what does it matter? I'm still going to get my paycheck. I'm still going to have everything. What does it matter? And that scares me because I'll tell you, as an intuitive, energetically, I do see it like the Titanic, but that's hard for people to relate to. So what are you seeing? Because this is your world, silver and gold and diamonds. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing is that, government says inflation's at 2%. They're aiming for 2%. And that means that they're willing to say that your purchasing power is going to go down by 2% a year. When you actually look at the real world and what it costs to buy groceries and insurance and going out for dinner or whatever it is, especially in a post-COVID world, you see prices climbing everywhere. And you realize, well, 2% is not really where it is. It's probably more like 5% or higher. And, if you were to go back to 2000 and say from 2000 to even 2010, maybe 2005, you didn't really notice inflation quite as much. But on a longer scale, let's say a 10-year period, if inflation's actually at 5% a year, that means that if you earned $100,000 10 years ago, you need to be earning $150,000 today, just so that you're not eating ground beef.
Yeah.
Right? You're still eating steak, just so that you're not taking the bus, you're still driving your car. And because that's a lot of money, $50,000. And that's before you get taxed on everything else that you're buying. So gold is, and silver is, a hedge against inflation. Gold's averaged 11% a year for the last 20 years plus. And so it's definitely an inflation fighter. And then something else that you were mentioning about advisors, to be properly diversified, you need negatively correlated assets. And what does that mean? It means if you are in the stock market and you have GICs, banking stocks, insurance, media, tech, your advisor says you're perfectly diversified. Actually, you're not. You're all on red. Your advisor's giving you a whole bunch of numbers on roulette that's all on red. No black, because they're all positively correlated to the dollar. If the dollar is going down at a clip of 5% or more per year, or we get into a stronger inflationary period, then all of those assets, it doesn't matter what they're doing, because the value of the dollar is going down. So, and they're all going down as a result. So having gold is a negatively correlated asset, and that's where you become truly diversified.
I do agree with everything you're saying. And I also like with gold and silver, and I'm going to tell you why, what happened to me recently, that you actually hold it, that it's actually some stuff you can hold, whether it's, I have stuff in your depository vaults, I have my own. I'll tell you, because the systems you can tell are shaking so much. Every e-transfer I've made since October, I've gotten a call from my bank's fraud department. Now, they say they're looking, but they're like, well, and I have money there. So they're like, are you sure? Do you know these people? I'm like, they've been in my list for how long, right? They're regular transfers that I've made for different. And it really got me thinking. Every day, if I make one, they call me. Oh, it's a fraud. We just want to make sure. And I'm like, isn't that interesting? Because you can see how I'm looking at this energetically, and there's a need to want to hold on to our deposits that we have there as well. And when you have something outside of the system, I'll tell you, it makes me feel safe. Mm-hmm. It makes me feel safe when I go, okay, at least I have some stuff outside of this system, because I don't believe we can keep printing into oblivion. Like it's got to crack at some point. It has to move, shift. And that's what I love about what you talk about, diversity. I always think it's funny when people say, oh, I'm so diversified. I'm like, but you're all in one area. Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, it is diversification. It is outside the system. The government is printing a lot of money. People are not blind to that anymore.
Yeah.
They see the government's printing money, and they see the Trudeau government giving money to other countries all of a sudden. It's like, no one's at work, and yet somehow the government has money. They don't produce anything.
No.
So people aren't stupid. They see what's going on. They go, I live in Toronto, and you can go downtown and see all of the stores that are for lease now, all of the units that are closed, the restaurants that are struggling, the theaters that are shut down, the planes that don't fly overhead. Where's the money? But somehow the government has it? No, there's a trust factor there. And eventually trust runs out. And that's why people are looking at the real estate market. That's a whole other thing. Again, just anecdotally, I live downtown, and wow, the amount of units going up for sale is absolutely crazy. Is it because they just want to move out of the city? Is it because they spent 3 months cooped up in one place and realized, I don't like this anymore? Are they trying to capitalize at the top of the market? They think it's at the top. Guess what? There's too much inventory now. So, you have the government keeping interest rates low. How do they do it? They do it by buying their own bonds, right? That's how they keep it low. They're buying back their own bonds to fake demand. At some point, that runs out too. At that point, when that runs out, interest rates go sky high, and your 5-year mortgage gets rolled over, and you're in a whack of trouble. So I see a lot of people who are saying, I don't want to be in real estate anymore. I've sold a property, whatever it is. And then you have people looking at the stock market saying, the Dow's at close to 28,000 points in and around. What's that going to take to double? Yeah. It's already been running for the last decade plus. That's beyond the scope of reality. So something's got to change here. And then you can clearly see it's money-based, right? Yeah. The Fed has printed, $3 trillion plus in the last 5 months. They did it all in 1 month. And, they tried to pay off the balance sheet in 2018 and failed miserably. They couldn't raise an interest rate 1% without, 0.25% without the stock market freaking out. So everyone's hooked on this monetary methadone, as Salente calls it, if you follow him.
Yeah, I like what you say there, because people the mindset. So people listening, I want you to understand what Jeremy's saying is, you're in this kind of manipulated space of, it keeps rising, everything's good. They want you to keep your money there. They need you to keep their money there. But I always take people back to, the book, The Fourth Turning, or I take them back in history. Well, they wanted everybody before the crash, right, in the 29, they wanted everybody to keep their money there too, even though it wasn't the system we had now. And all of these changes. And it's interesting there. I want to ask you. So I got this really interesting question from somebody that they do want me to ask you. So understanding that all of the economies in the world are going to take a big shift. So she says, if we buy our precious metals in US dollars for Canadian, so if you're in the US, you're buying in US dollars. If you're, I guess the rest of the world, most of the metals go back to the US dollars. You can clarify that. So her question was really good. What if I buy in US dollars and the US dollar tanked?
Yeah.
What happens to my metals, or where is there an adjustment there? And I thought, what a brilliant question. I never. So I'm asking you. You're the expert.
and I get that question probably once a day.
Oh, okay.
At least a couple times a week. So here's the thing. Yeah. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency. So we have to buy oil in US dollars, right? You buy lumber in US dollars. Right. So even if you buy, cut down the forest in Canada, sell the wood to the US, they build a desk, you're buying it in US dollars. So that's just part of what we're doing, or it's just part of the system. And you're not hedging the US dollar, you're hedging the Canadian dollar. But you have to buy it in US dollars. So I look at it as just a small additional tax because of the US dollar. In other words, you don't not buy strawberries because they're from California. You don't even look at the price. You just go, they're Canadian. It's $7 a pint. Oh, it used to be $5. You don't go to Indigo or Chapters and say, well, on the back of the book, it says it's $10 American and Canadian price is $15. Forget it. I'm not going to buy the book. This is just sort of a tax we pay as not being the world's reserve currency. You're not investing in the US dollar. You're investing in a universal asset that hedges against all currencies. If you were to look at a chart, you would see that gold is up average 10% plus in most currencies, which is telling you that all of those currencies are losing value. So for us, we're hedging the Canadian dollar. And even if the rate is 1.35, let's say, you're not losing 35%. You're losing the cost of the exchange, right?
I love how you explain this, because you always put it in simple terms. And this is what people always tell me they love so much about you. And it's why I love having you on, because it's easy to understand. So if the reserve currency went to another country, it would probably just shift into that country.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter, we can look at the future right, of what the monetary system might eventually look like. The British pound was the world reserve currency for a long time. Yeah. It transferred, world went on, nothing crazy changed. And something else is going to come along pretty soon, because you can see the trust value or the trust in these currencies is waning rapidly. And gold is the bridge. Gold is a store of value, and that's what you see, and that's why it is a hedge against inflation, and that's why you're going to want to hold some of that until the new system arrives, and then you can say, great, I've maintained my purchasing power because gold and silver are stores of value.
And what, I mean, we've had this conversation, but the other one that came up was a lot of the planners will say, well, okay, you said it does 10% a year. You and I know I love, you can see every year, but then they go, well, I don't get a dividend.
Right.
Can we adjust that to the people? I've said it, but I want for other people to listen why you want gold and to get out of that thought of, well, it doesn't have a dividend, so I better not be there.
Right. So let's first look at, for an example, a GIC, right? People buy a GIC because they're so conservative that they don't want to lose any money, but you're getting 1%. You're losing money. You're losing your purchasing power. You've just basically given in because the only choice you have is to take a risk right now. There's no interest. It's a war on savers. There's no benefit to having money in the bank. So if you're getting a GIC and you're only getting 1-2%, and inflation's much higher than that, even if it's 5%, that you're losing 3%, and you pay capital gains on the 2% that you're making. So you're already down 4% basically before you start. Dividends. Look, I think dividends have positive attributes. There's nothing wrong with dividends, right? But the cost to own gold, if you're looking at a 10%, 11% a year gain on average, what difference does it make that it's paying a dividend? And the other aspect of dividends, ultimately, gold is not an investment. It's money. Right? The money in your wallet doesn't pay you a dividend. If you put it into the bank and make the bank a creditor, right, then they give you an interest. But now they're a liability. Yeah. Right? And the idea of gold is it's nobody's liability. So of course it doesn't pay a dividend because it's money. Right? It's a stored value, right? And that's why it doesn't pay a dividend. And that's okay. Not everything has to pay you a dividend. I mean,
but that's also diversification.
But what good is a dividend if the stock goes
exactly.
down?
Exactly. I've been looking at the stock market and I'm like, so people know, I'm like, if you're having a problem in your wealth, guys, you got to listen to this because a lot of times people develop issues around their money because they're afraid to ask these questions. They're afraid to talk to someone like you. They're afraid to look outside of the box. They're afraid to challenge, maybe their advisor. They're afraid to just start to do some information, or they have, their father said, oh, gold was bad or silver was bad, or it's been in a depression. And people get afraid of this.
Yeah. And here's another kind of interesting perspective. Like we're talking about dividends, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the biggest asset most people have that's part of their wealth?
Their home.
Their home.
Yeah.
You know how much you don't ever really own your home. What's the property tax you pay every year?
I know.
If you paid $5,000 a year income tax, okay, 30 years later, it's $150,000. Mm-hmm. What dividend did the house give you? You paid interest, you paid property tax, you paid
repairs,
you paid insurance, you paid all sorts of things. And then you pay the agent to leave, to sell, to buy, land transfer, all of these things. And people just somehow, it doesn't matter. Why? Because the money just goes onto the mortgage, and as long as you don't see it, nobody cares. Right?
Yeah, they say, look I saved all this money. I always ask people that. They're like, my house went up 20%. I'm like, okay, how much did you put in rentals? How much did you pay in interest? Because if you didn't pay cash for your house, you got to factor those in. How much did you pay in property? And they look at me like, why are you taking the wind out of my sails? I said, because your perception isn't right. You have to, and this is what I love about when people talk to you is they start to have to change their perception. And this is what I want everybody listening. This is really important timing to change your perception. You hear me talking about going to the new earth, the monetary system's going to the new earth. So this is like, we have to change our perception. And this is what I really like with gold and silver. And this is another question that happens. Why? Because I like both metals, you and I have had this conversation. I understand silver is an industrial metal, but a lot of people don't get this. A lot of people just go, well, should I just have gold? Why do I need silver? Why would I have both? And I have this question because people are like, if I want to move money, they go, well, why would I even look at silver versus gold?
Right. Well, I think ultimately people look to have at least some silver in their portfolio because it's a much smaller market. it's much more, and therefore the moves are exaggerated or amplified from what you see in the gold market. So because silver is a smaller market, if both markets are falling, say gold goes down 5%, silver might go down 10, right? Equally on the upside. So when the markets are both moving forward, you have a bottleneck kind of thing with silver where you have same amount of money, same amount of people all trying to barrel into a small market, and that pushes it much, much higher. There's other fundamentals at play. The fact that there's 5 billion ounces of gold above ground. There's like maybe 1 billion ounces of silver above ground. So silver is actually more rare than gold. So there's a lot of different things that can really push that market higher. It is more volatile. Yeah. You do have to be able to say that. And because of that, you do have to be more nimble. And my experience of watching investors over the last 15 years, you do have to have the ability to hit that sell button. Now, there are things that you can do in the market to not have to try to pick a price. That's usually the biggest mistake. I'll sell at this price, right? Bitcoin, I'll sell at 22,000, not at 20, not at 18. You bought it at 10. How much is enough? So there are things that you can do to kind of get that out of your mentality so that you know when to sell, or at least what to be looking for. But I think that with silver, there is going to be a fear of missing out, because when both markets move, and this year is a perfect case in point, gold's up 24%, silver's up over 30%. Silver was up higher than that recently. And, silver could end the year at $34 an ounce. Who knows? It could move very, very quickly. And that's something that's very intriguing and appealing to people, just how rapid things can change in the silver market.
Yeah, I think too, you'll remind me his name, just escaped me. We were talking about it before, but the head of First Majestic was talking with Mike Maloney too, how he had a meeting with, I believe it was the head of Samsung. You guys can double check that. And he wouldn't share certain things because he also had his own concerns about the lack of supply of silver for what are, when we look at how much our electronics and the new way of things coming in, everything has silver. And it's not, from my understanding, it's not as easy to just recycle the silver out of every computer and every TV and every, piece of medical equipment. And so, I think that, to me, I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense, that this is also not just money as people look at it, or they say it's not money, but the industrial side of it is huge. Yeah,
we're so dependent on silver for every single light switch, computer, cell phone, plasma screen TV. The price is inelastic, meaning if the price went through the moon, you still need that quarter ounce in every computer. And so Apple would figure it out. But here's an interesting thing you brought up about industry. So, I'm not sure, you probably know, JP Morgan is paying $1 billion fine for
all the manipulation. Yes.
So the manipulating of these markets over the years, despite the fact that gold is up 11% on average a year, silver's up on average 11% a year. So if you've held it for the last 20 years, it's completely done its job. But there's still been a lot of manipulation, including spoofing, which is a funny aspect. I mean, we were talking about it on our show this week.
Yeah,
but what's interesting
you might want to explain spoofing too. Just, can we go there after this? Because people have asked me. Okay.
So, but what's interesting about the manipulation is it depends on a couple things. One, it's based on a veneer of a small amount of physical product. And then they create synthetic supply, a whole bunch of paper to create it and push the markets around. But in order for it to be pulled off, Samsung and Tiffany's, right, and Apple and whatever, they need to get their silver and have the impression that there's no issue with supply. Because if they did, then they'd be saying, okay, like 1978, we actually need a stockpile of metal. We're not just going to buy it as we need it, right? So they have to have an impression that there's lots of supply, which there isn't. And if anything, what we learned in March, which we knew way before then, but what we really learned in March was everyone wanted toilet paper and they wanted their physical gold. And people who thought they owned physical gold didn't own physical gold. And so all of those people wanted their metals, trying to get it. And a whole bunch of other people said, whoa, maybe I should have some money outside the system. Maybe I should have some physical product. And they were trying to get in. And now there's just been a massive rush to the metals. They were so cheap that the wholesalers had to raise all the premiums because there was no choice. So there's two markets now. There's the paper market, and they set a price, and then the wholesalers say, for the last 2 months, we've been filling back our supply at $28, $29 silver. Here it is at 20, 23, although it's moving up again. What are we supposed to do with that product? Can't sell it. So we'll raise the premium.
Yeah.
And if you want it, you can buy it. And that's how the real world works.
And I think that's what people have to understand. Like they'll go online and they'll look at, I don't know, whatever news report, like you said, that silver is $23 an ounce. So they think they're going to call you and get it for 23 an ounce. But there is supply and demand, which means, there's all the spaces in the middle. So the premiums are going to go up and the shortage. And a lot of people still can't understand that. They really think they should be getting it for what that spot price is. But that's a lot of manipulation too in there.
Right. Well, the difference, you're right. There is that stock mentality, right? There's no cost for paper, right? What does it cost me to buy a stock?
Yeah.
$5, and I can buy as much as I want of it, and there's no premium on top. Precious metals is an end user fabricated retail product, which means the price that you see, the paper price, is it's the sugar and chocolate. It's not the cake. It's the lumber, not the desk, as we talked about earlier. And so obviously someone's producing it, someone's hedging it, someone's storing it and insuring it, packaging it, shipping it off to a wholesaler who's selling it to a retailer. So it's not unlike Kit Kat, right? Nestle produces a Kit Kat. That's their cost. They sell it to a wholesaler who distributes it to Esso and Shoppers Drug Mart, right? Obviously, there's a cost of doing business there, and you're not buying a Kit Kat for just the pure cost of sugar. Yeah. But that's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Again, any asset you've ever purchased, right? You buy shoes. There's a cost to that. There's a retail cost to that. And if you're really savvy, you wait till it goes on sale and you hope your size is still there. But like all of those things, those are all depreciating assets. Mm-hmm. Precious metals is an appreciating asset. So you can clearly see that after a year or two, I mean, this year's been great, but once you've overcome the cost of doing business, that's it. It's yours. It's an asset that you own.
Yeah, I do love it. People still think I'm crazy, but I love listening to everything precious. I listen to your show. If I can't listen to it on Saturday, I listen to it when I come out. I just told you I listened to it last night. I'll just sit there and like, okay, I say to people, get educated. And this is partly where this question is for people who've never been into precious metals. This question is, should we leave our existing investments alone, or do we start to move from what we have? It's at a better place. So basically she's saying, if I've got a whole stock portfolio, should I be accumulating cash to buy, or is it a better place? Can I move out of what I have into precious metals?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I always think it's good to crawl, walk, run. I think it's always good to get your feet wet, get some physical product in your possession, feel it, understand it, right? Once you do, it makes sense. Every person that comes to the office, we put 100-ounce bar of silver in their hand. They feel how heavy it is, and they go, okay, now I get it. I completely understand it. Or just putting a gold maple coin in someone's hand, because you can actually feel the gold, because most of the gold's packaged these days. To feel that kind of warmth of that metal is also kind of special. So you get the light bulb moment, you get the aha moment, you say, okay, I understand what this is all about. I think ultimately, you don't drive a car without insurance, and you don't have a house without insurance. So why would you have a portfolio without insurance as well? So you have to start building that up. Whatever way suits you, that's great. We personally find that most people who start to move into metals eventually build up such a comfort that 10-15% doesn't cut it.
Yeah.
That's what's really pushed out there by all the experts, even though they all say, 10, 15%, like even Mike Maloney probably says it, or
actually,
Jim
we
Rickards.
moved it up higher. I will tell you.
Moved it up higher?
Moved it up higher. Yeah, I will say that.
Yeah, Jim Rickards would say, 10, 15%. Peter Schiff would say, 10, 15%. I really liked the honesty. There was an interview with Egon von Greyerz. He does what we do, physical, outright, stored, segregated, allocated. His minimum clients like $500,000. And he said, look, all of our clients are in way over 25%.
Yeah.
And then they asked him, when are your clients going to sell? Which I thought was a good, what's the exit strategy? He said, I think everyone's just going to wait until the new financial system's in place. Why would you sell before then? What would be the purpose?
You know what? That's awesome. One thing I want to say, I did a money class, I go wealth class with energy. And one of the things it is, I put them in two groups. And I had a 10-ounce bar of silver. And I had a $100 bill. And I made them pass it around and just tune in. And everyone at the end was like, oh my God, I get it. Like you were saying, just to feel it. And I do agree with you. I am one of those people, full disclosure, I'm over the 25%. I don't like what I see in the monetary system. That's me personally. I'm not saying anybody advice, but for me personally, that is just, I have that comfort. And I like what you said here, because one of the questions was exactly that. Like, when do you move your silver into the gold, or do you cash out silver if you have it? This person owns it. So she wants to know, do I cash it out, or do I move it into gold and then cash it out? Like, is there a process, or does it really matter?
So one of the things that is good to look at is there's a couple things you can look at. One is the percentage in your portfolio, right? I'm not an advisor. I'm just saying what you see in the market, and part of this all really just comes down to value. So if the fiduciary responsibility is to say, your advisor says, yes, you should have 10, 15% in precious metals. Well, if gold doubles over a period of a year, and the stock market comes down, then that percentage in your portfolio maybe went from 15% up to 40. Well, that tells you right there, I'm just gonna prune my portfolio a little bit and bring it back down to 15. Did I mention price? No, it doesn't matter. We're just hyper focused on the measurements in the portfolio. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is, this kind of goes right back to the beginning of the conversation. It's understanding the value of the currency. If you asked anybody, what's the value of the Canadian dollar? They say, I think it's 1.35 against the US dollar.
Wow.
Oh, okay. So what's the value of that? I'm not sure. Is it backed by gold, right? So at the end of the day, if you don't understand the value of the dollar, and that's the whole purpose here, that the Canadian dollar, we have no idea what the value is. We know that the price of coffee is going up, but we don't know what the value of the dollar is. And there's no proper measurement for it either, because it's not against anything. It's against a whole bunch of other currencies that have no anchor. So I might as well figure out how much you weigh with a measuring tape. It just doesn't work. Yeah. But if you start to understand what purchasing power is and what gold and silver buys you, then you can say, oh, okay, well, it used to cost me 650 ounces of gold to buy a house. Yeah. Now it's only costing 300 ounces to buy a house. I have more purchasing power with my gold. That's where gold is at. Maybe this is a good time to sell. Again, nothing to do with price, right? Yeah. And you can do the same thing with silver, gold ratio, those sorts of things.
I love, because this is like, people listening, you need to be accountable with your money. I wish they would teach this in schools, because we, in the end, it's not you, it's not me, it's not an advisor, and it's none of that. But our own decisions are what make us accountable. And if we're not listening to shows like this, and, really looking and saying, okay, what's right for me, right? And like you said, I heard Mike Maloney the other day say, his exit strategy was whatever the percentage of his portfolio. He said, just not advice. He was just saying, I'm going to liquidate 30% of that when I hit a number I'm comfortable with. Then he says, when I hit a different number, I'll liquidate another 30% of whatever that total is, right? And I thought, that's a great way to look at it. And then I was listening to Lynette Zhang from ITM Trading, and she was talking about, I love her, she's so sweet. She was talking about how, I think it was in the 2019, in the crash, I think she said like 20 ounces of silver bought like a whole New York City block. And
Right.
it really, but the reason I like this is because it gets you thinking, it gets you looking and asking different questions that would be right for whatever anybody's listening to, going, maybe I wanted to look at my portfolio and do something a little different. And this actually leads into another question, because I know I'm in Canada too. We have what's called a TFSA here, which is a tax-free savings account, and I hold precious metals personally in that. So I also know that you at Guildhall, you move RESPs or RSPs, pensions. This woman wanted to know, are you able to move anything that's locked in pension to metals?
Yes.
You can. Okay.
Yes. So all we have to do is we have to mirror the account with our partner Questrade. So if you have a spousal RSP, we have to open a spousal RSP. If you have a locked-in RSP, we have to make sure we're opening a locked-in, right? So you can't just move money from a lira over to a RIF. You have to keep the same account.
Okay.
Once we've established the same account, let's call it a locked-in RSP, then we request the funds to be moved over from the outgoing institution. And once the funds arrive, we're buying actual physical product. And essentially all it is we have a platform that connects Guildhall, the client, Questrade, the wholesaler, and the vault. So we put you onto the platform, we set up the trade with your authorization, we execute and make the acquisition. You're buying the product directly from a wholesaler, and then they have 10 days to deliver it to the vault, and it's being delivered to your own sub-account at the vault. And this is really key because it means that this product is yours, and then it's allocated. You get the serial numbers. So there's no mistaking the fact that this is direct ownership of your own product in the vault, which means there's no counterparty risk, right? Guildhall disappears overnight, nothing happens to your metal. We never owned it. Questrade disappears overnight, nothing happens to your metal, you own it.
So this is actually really good for, it's funny, I asked you a question, my other computer went bloop. So guess you didn't like that question. I like this because basically for people, I want you to listen to what Jeremy just said. You basically said if you move something into Questrade in Canada, and I'm sure there's similar programs in other countries, if you move money, if something happened to them, you didn't lose your metals.
Correct.
Yeah, this is huge.
Yeah.
This is huge because when people in Greece, woke up and my partner's Greek, so I hear a lot about this, but when they woke up and they couldn't get access to their money and they lost all their money, and then people say, well, that will never happen. And I'm not saying it is. Hopefully they're smart enough to figure it out. I don't know. But I don't think we can ever say never's never. And this is a huge thing to say that if you have any kind of, TFSA or a registered account and it's sitting there and you still have access to the product, they're not holding you hostage like we've seen in other worlds.
Yeah, we've had clients take delivery of product. So they've paid their withholding tax and then physically taken delivery of the product. TFSA, you don't need to pay a withholding tax. You're just paying a couple admin fees and sending in a letter of direction. We are seeing lots of changes going on. We're seeing a complete lack of discipline when it comes to the economy and comes to monetary, policy and things like this. They've just basically thrown it all out the window and said, let's go socialist. Let's just give everyone money, but that you're just begging to be a slave. You're just, I had a conversation with someone the other day talking about universal income. Oh yeah, you want $500?
Don't even get me on that one.
like $500 a week for free for how long? Yeah. Until you're begging to get $700, and the government isn't giving it to you anymore, and you've just been hooked onto it. So that's a big problem too. And
I'm going to say on an energetic side, I want to say this from the energy point of view. When you start to see these systems, part of why I love silver and gold so much, and I really believe, this is just my belief, not advice, I have to say that, but I believe it's so important to have, And even if you want to, the IMF is talking about digital currencies. We know in the Fed, in the States, they're like getting Fed wallets that are digital currency, and you're just like, oh, here's my money, go spend. So we know if you're hearing this thinking I'm talking gibberish, or you're Jeremy talking gibberish, you need to find a way. This is a way to still have your sovereign being, your independence, because the government wants you so reliant on them. Like you said, social. Well, who's going to pay for this? Because you and I know, I went to the grocery store yesterday and I had two bags at one of our local grocery stores. I'm not talking organic because mostly times I get my meat and everything from the farmer. I'll drive out there Sunday. It was $101. And if you looked in my bag, there was not much. Like I did have 3 things of grass-fed butter, sure. But so they're like $6-7. But think about this, like butter right now in Canada, you're paying minimum $7 plus for an ounce, like a little thing of butter.
Yeah.
So if people can't understand this, that if you're holding gold and silver, you're getting appreciation, but you're also more in charge of your money. You have more of a say. Yeah,
it's you're being your own central bank.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is once you realize, we talked about the real estate thing, once you realize how much between inflation and taxes, how much the government's after you and after your wealth, you realize, okay, well, why am I putting my money into the stock market and throwing it into a risk? Listen, there's a lot of people that are very freewheeling with their own money. That's okay, right? Yeah. But it's, for me, it's important to have a safety net. And personally, I sleep soundly knowing I've got gold, and knowing that you can quickly go, how many ounces do I have? Okay, what's that worth? Okay, that's a good cushion, right? And one day, it's going to be a bit of a catch-22. The price of gold, I mean, you're seeing the numbers. Some people are saying, it'll go to 7,000 in the next decade. Some are saying, it could go to 15,000. Some are saying it could go even higher. And is that crazy? No, because $28,000 for the Dow is not crazy. Someone said it was crazy at some point. And if you look at housing prices, 1.4 for a shack,
For a garage. We live for a garage. Yeah.
You're like, are they going to at least renovate it for this much money that I'm spending? And again, going back to the real estate thing, I mean, this is something that's really on my mind, this idea of paying property tax that you say, well, what if I put $5,000 into gold or silver every year for the last 15, 20, 30 years, 35 years? How many ounces of gold would I have and what would it be worth? I can tell you it would be worth a lot more than $150,000. Because if you were buying gold in 2001, when it was trading at $400 an ounce, you're buying 10 ounces of gold.
Yeah.
For the first couple of years, you would have been up like 25 ounces of gold. Now, okay, you can't do it today, but you got to start somewhere too, right? So people would say, oh, do you think it's expensive? I don't know. You think gold's expensive at $2,000 an ounce? What about $250 trillion in debt globally without unfunded liability? Where is that coming from? You don't think the government's going to get that desperate that they're going to raise taxes or inflate it away somehow? Yeah. They're going to leave you out in the lurch. And trust me, you are going to be the last to know, right?
100%, because the government only cares about them. The people there are only doing what's best for them. And this is why it's so important to understand. And I love what you said. I hear this a lot. Oh, that gold is so expensive. And I'm like, okay, so really it's expensive to preserve your whatever amount of money you have in your savings. And when people say to me it's expensive, that's never going to happen. I love the whole analogy of, did you think we'd be wearing masks a year ago?
Mm.
Did you? None of us did, right? None of us. I didn't think so. I knew it would be a crazy year, but I didn't think we'd be having a world pandemic and wearing masks.
And you and I watched it closely over those first few months. You were traveling. We were talking about that. And it was like, we were just kind of saying, is this coming? Do we really, and going back to Greece, look, if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. I mean, at this point, I'm sure a lot of people tuning in today know people who work for banks. They're all at home. The financial district in Toronto is dead zone. Yeah. And a lot of the reason for that as well, how much money the government is giving the banks out of
huge
clear blue sky? They don't even need people anymore. They're just making money straight off the government.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Hey, we need them day to day, but if the government's just going to hand out money, then give it to me and I'll buy more gold.
Yeah, people really don't take that time to look. And this, I can't stress this enough. I don't think gold's expensive. I've been accumulating with gold and silver a little bit here. I dollar cost average, you know that. I just believe a little bit more. And sometimes I wake up going, oh, I need to do more, and then you get my call. But it's literally, I cannot stress enough. And I've been saying this for months in my community. This fall, winter, I don't care who wins the U.S. election. It's going to be a gong show because it was 4 years ago. It is going to be, I don't like to put it out there. Wouldn't be surprised if they have some sort of civil war going on. We're at breaking points because these systems don't work.
Yeah.
And so you said it well. Listen, guys, this is like the new earth. This is a crumbling of the old. Gold and silver, when I look at it, when I feel it, when I touch it, I'm like you said, I can sleep at night.
The other thing, I think the hump for people to get over a lot of the time for a first time owner of precious metals is just that first level move up where they break even on their cost of doing business and profit. Once that happens, you're in the clear. You can buy more, whenever you want, whatever it is. But it's just that initial, okay, I'm buying it at 2,000, which means gold's got to get to 2,100 for me to feel comfortable again. Yeah. But it's done that. It keeps doing it, right? So, but that really is the first challenge of getting over that. And it's funny, we talked about Mike Maloney. He put out a video maybe a year ago where he showed a chart of all of the places where he'd bought gold along the way. And him and I were the exact same. It was just one of those things where every time we both bought gold, it dropped. And you're just like, every time I buy, it drops. But I bought it at $580 and it dropped. Do I care where it dropped to now? No, I couldn't even tell you where it dropped to. I bought it at 1,900 at the very peak and it dropped. Although once you converted it into Canadian, it was $1,600 an ounce. Yeah. Right? That was still good money. Was I really down? Not that much, from the peak. And you averaged all the way along. So I think doing an accumulation process, especially the way you do it, Tracy, that really helps even things out. You build up the accumulation, you build up the confidence, you experience the market, and then you probably wouldn't feel comfortable without it.
No, I wouldn't. And it's funny because you probably notice when it drops, I'm like buying silver and gold, like the lady that loves to buy purses and shoes, right? They go on sale, they're buying purses and shoes. When it's going on sale, I'm calling you or I'm emailing you going, okay, we need to buy some more. Like even in March, right? When everything changes, it does all drop, but then that's a great time to accumulate because it's going to find its way back.
Yeah. And again, we understand that there will come a day where everyone is going to be selling a whole bunch.
Yes.
We hope that people maintain a certain amount in their portfolio, and we understand some people say, no, I'm going to sell it all because I'm going to buy something or invest somewhere else, and that's fine. But we understand that there will come a day where we're all going to look at it and say, I think we've got our value out of this. Yeah. I think it's a time to really start selling off a good portion of this portfolio.
Yeah. I know we're already at the top of the hour.
But we're nowhere near that. I can tell you, we're nowhere near.
No, I'm not going anywhere. This is a person, they always ding dong. Some delivery person comes always at the top of the hour. I want to know before we go, because I can't thank you enough for your wisdom and sharing. If you had to leave a thought in all the listeners' heads and the people that are going to watch this later, given everything you know, everything you've seen in the markets, everything you experience every day in gold and silver, what would be that message you'd really want them to take away and think about?
I would say precious metals have no counterparty risk. And we're in a system that has risks everywhere, and you don't know where most of those risks even lie because there's not enough research to go around, and too much disinformation and too many people motivated on one side or the other. Gold has no counterparty risk, and that's a good thing to have. And what it does against inflation it's going to provide you the biggest inflation rebate you've ever seen. You like getting that rebate, that tax rebate at the end of the year? Hold on to some gold and silver and see how that insurance pays out over the years.
Yeah, I always feel like we're just getting going, and counterparty risk is meaning that you don't have a million people, guys, in between. You don't have a million people manipulating what's happening, even though we know there's manipulation. Where can people get a hold of you if they have questions, information?
Sure. Yeah. Guildhallwealth.com. You can go there and sign up for a newsletter, sign up for a package, learn more about the registered accounts. The number's 18778 is the number. I was like, what's the normal number? Real Money Show on Global News Radio 640 Toronto airs Saturdays at 1, Sundays at 10, but guildhallwealth.com.
Yeah, and I highly recommend anybody that's listening to listen to the Money Show, even if you get it on the YouTube channel, because if you can't make it listening to it, then just go onto the YouTube channel. There's so much information there. You have so much patience, compassion. I can't thank you enough for dealing with everybody the way you have and really educating. And I think that's a big thing about you, is to make sure that people feel comfortable with the information. Now, my other question before we go is, what about the people that are outside of Canada? How do they find quickly a reputable person that does what you guys do? And because I know you guys inside and out, I love how you do business. So I have no problem saying, go here, because a lot of people run into bad places. Right. What do you recommend? Where do they go? How would they find somebody in their area?
I would say it's easy to look up precious metals in a dealer in any neighborhood. I would just say stick with what's called LBMA approved product.
LBMA. Right?
LBMA, London Bullion Market Association.
Okay.
That means that the product all is the same quality criteria, right? So Royal Canadian Mint is the same quality as Perth Mint. It's the same quality as Valcambi or Pamp Swiss or any of these brands. You want to make sure that it's LBMA, so that way you know the quality is assured and you know that they're sourcing the product ethically. If you're buying the proper product, it really doesn't matter who you're buying it from, right? Obviously, it's good to look at reviews, and most bullion dealers have reviews like Trustpilot or some other source, Google reviews. I think it's really important to look at those reviews. And finally, it's very important that if you're going to make an acquisition, that the product be available for immediate delivery. What we don't want to see is people go out there, give $30,000 to someone and wait 5 months to get their product. And we've seen that recently, even with some people in some companies in Toronto, and it really shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I love that, and that is incredible advice. I can't thank you enough for joining us. The hour's gone. Right. So I thank you, and everybody listening, please, if you're in Canada, reach out to Jeremy. It doesn't matter where you are in Canada. Check out those places in the countries you're in so you can understand. So thank you so much for joining us again, Jeremy. So appreciate it.
Tracy, love talking with you. Love to see you. Can't wait to chat with you again.
Yeah, so thank you. This is always my delight. You all know how much I love Jeremy for his wealth, his knowledge, and he always thinks a lot on our same line in my community. So people that wonder, yeah, he gets what you're saying when you call him. So thank you, everybody. Next week we have a call-in show. Make sure you go to tracylclark.com, sign up for the newsletter so you'll know when the book's coming out. And we're going to do some fun things around that as well. Maybe read a few chapters and you can get to know a little bit more of my story and how I got to where I am today. So have an incredible week, everyone, and we'll see you same time, same place.
Thank you for listening to the Tracy L. Clark Show with me, Tracy L., where I teach you how to connect to the God consciousness so you can unlock your superpowers and connect at light speed and live your extraordinary life. Tune in every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio, where together we will unlock the secrets of your body and your life. As the founder of the Body Regeneration Academy, I, Tracy L., will provide you with the insight and simple tools you can apply right now in your life to move you forward and leave the past in the dust. To join the Body Regeneration TLC Online Academy, make sure you check me out at tracylclark.com.